Car guys have all heard it before. Buying a fancy car is like just throwing your money down the toilet. It's just gonna drop in value in a year. Blah, 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 blah. But the problem is that unfortunately, those people are usually right. But did you know that there's cars on the market that can either stay the same or go up in value? And we're gonna tell you exactly what they are. So what does that mean for you? It means you can drive a sweet ideal car for free, or even make a little bit of money driving it. One of the cars on this list has 300 horsepower and not one but two turb skis. And another is a star from the Fast and Furious movie. Trust me, you're not gonna wanna miss this. Here you go, 8 more cars that you can drive for free. Let's go. Lately, the Ford Bronco has pretty much broken the internet. And it's not just because the new one's coming out. Even people that know less than nothing about cars probably know the name of this iconic vehicle. And that's because of its TV cameo in front of 95 million people, as it was the transporter of choice of O.J. Simpson. And while that particular event might shed some not so great light on this classic Ford truck, owners of the Ford Bronco have often developed a loving relationship with their clunky trucks. And that love affair extends way beyond that infamous moment. Broncos are big and they're comfortable and they're even pretty fun to drive. To me, having spent a little bit of seat time behind the wheel of one, I think the easiest way to explain driving a Bronco is it's pretty much the equivalent of riding an elephant. It's slow and it's lethargic, but it's peaceful and powerful. And the hype around the Bronco is really magnified over the last few years, and in turn has propelled the prices of the first gen through the roof. Thankfully, those roofs can be topless, but it's still possible to get that third gen, which was built from 1980 to 1986, and drive that thing for free. Back in the 80s when the third gen came out, they retailed for about 11K. So here's what you do. You get a good example, you avoid being chased by the cops, and then sell it in a year or two when you want to trade up to the brand new model. And with that 2020 version coming out, the Bronco hype is real and it is at an all-time high. And if any of you guys remember the Supra launch and what that did to the Mark IV Supras, that means the prices of these classic Broncos are just gonna keep on climbing. And just so you know, I've linked to all of the cars and trucks that we cover in this list down in the description and the first comment, and it will go to our friends over at AutoTEMPEST, so check them out after you watch this video, of course. Because the next car on this list is an absolute gem from Mitsubishi. I never thought I'd be saying that. And you could roll around in this son of a rally car for pretty much nothing at all. Yeah, these things are not depreciating much at all. And since they were discontinued in 2015, please bring back the Evo. They will likely continue to go up. But you've been warned, finding an unabused model is gonna be tough. And I know what you're thinking. You know this sweet rally car from one of the Fast and Furious movies. Or, well, at least from competing in the World Rallycross for decades. But if you always assume that this car was way out of your budget, you're wrong. Yes, picking up a 2015 model can cost around 35 grand. But the good news is that all these cars barely depreciate at all. Because think about it, the 2015 model is only depreciated about 10% from when it first came out 5 years ago to where it's priced at today on the used market. And it's got a ton going for it because not only is it an awesome performer, it looks great, but Mitsubishi killed off the beloved Evo. So it's simple supply and demand. And since there is no more supply, and it's such a good car that handles power so well that the demand's gonna continue to rise, yeah, you picking up what I'm throwing down? The Lancer Evo is actually appreciating, and it's gonna continue to go up. So it's best to catch this wave now. Now is the time to buy. And this is an awesome car. And the cherry on top is if you get to drive it for free. And that little 2-liter turbo engine and that rally-ready all-wheel drive really makes driving the Evo feel like you're competing in the WRC. Just remember, try to keep it clean and don't tear it up too bad, especially if you do want to sell it for more than you bought it for. So if you're looking for style and maneuverability, the Bishi is badass. Just promise me this, you give the car a thorough inspection from an actual professional before you buy. And if you're actually looking at prices of Evos, which you can see my ideal picks down below, the prices for them are all over the map. Near new examples are fetching over 6 figures. It's a pretty, that's a little too rich for my blood. But you can get into your own for around 30 grand, like this 15 with the AMS package for 36. Next up is a Bavarian beauty that is quickly becoming a classic in the eyes of collectors. I mean, who said there's no such thing as a free ride or a free lunch? Is it free lunch or free ride? Now, I think I'm speaking for most of us that we love the original E30, but the brutal truth is that it's slow, it's expensive, and it makes pretty ordinary noises. And the later E46 M3, which I've owned not one, two, but three of these, is the polar opposite. Okay, and before you say it's heavier, it's much more common, and it doesn't have the earlier cars motorsport pedigree, I'd have to just say that, well, you're right, but you're also wrong. Because the E46 is the perfect blend of fun, it's not out of this world expensive, and yet the prices have been continuously climbing recently. So it's a good time to buy. Now, the way to go is the manual transmission. And if you want to help save the manuals, go snag our ideal tee up here. It's our best seller. And one of my M3s was the SMG semi-auto, which I personally really enjoyed, but it doesn't fetch a premium on the used market. And so if you want a recession-proof buy, you get a manual coupe. Now, the specific one to buy, which is the last one I had, is the competition package M3 that they made for the last 2 years in 05 and 06. It's got the better looking wheels, different steering ratio, bigger brakes, and a couple other goodies. And those are definitely the ideal investment. Just promise me this, before you drive off into the sunset in one, make sure that rear floor pan isn't cracked before you fully deploy all 333 horses. Ask me how I know. It's not cheap to fix. I've always had my eyes on an E30 M3 because my first car was a 318 IS, and you just can't argue with how classic cool that Bimmer is. But unfortunately, the E30 M3s are pretty overpriced these days, and they just don't offer very good bang for your buck in terms of performance. And that E46 M3 fills the gap nicely because it's more affordable, it's way faster, and it is just as much fun to drive. With the inline six under the hood and the confident, inspiring handling, this thing is just short of supercar. And guess what? The E46 M3 has been depreciating heavily until recently. And if you dig into the trends, you can tell that this thing is gaining classic status pretty quickly, and they're actually starting to appreciate in value. So what does this mean for you and me? You can buy one of these bad boys at the lowest prices they've ever been today. Drive it for a couple years, make some awesome memories in it, and then profit when you sell it. And if it were up to me, I'd get a Laguna Seca Blue M3 stick, and I would use the ideal car strategies to buy it like a pro. And our next ride is a super rare Nissan that jumps up in price pretty much every single day. And I bet it will have you jumping out of your seat with the specs it offers. Just that much fun. Yeah, we're talking about the Nissan 300ZX Twin Turbo. And this thing was an attempt to revive the spirit of Nissan's famed Fair Lady Z. This car originally was designed by the visionary Toshio Yamashita, who had this goal in mind of redefining the way cars were designed. In fact, this is the first car ever that was designed using CAD. Yeah, like the computer program. And Toshio took heavy influence from American sports car culture because he wanted to make the 300ZX a mean, lean driving machine. And so he made it lower, he made it wider than any of its predecessors, with a boxy yet aerodynamic design. And when you add this all up, it looked like it fit on American streets. And the twin Garrett turbochargers and dual intercoolers they offered in the twin Turbski version made this car powerful enough to blow past pretty much anything on the road. The top-tier variant of the 300ZX spits out an impressive 300 horses and generates 283 foot-pounds of torque. And imagine this, you could be driving around in your 300ZX, surrounded by your fighter jet cockpit without losing a single dollar if you play your cards right. This forgotten Japanese supercar is becoming increasingly more rare every single day. And so naturally, the market on this sweet machine is on the rise. So if you grab a low-mile twin turbo for like 29 grand, you get to enjoy it for a little bit, and I bet when it comes time to sell, you'll get more than what you paid. And the next car on this list is also increasing in rarity, but this one's an American classic with a custom rebuild. Steve Saleen, a relative nobody, kind of like me from Southern California, rose to become one of the most recognizable names in car culture around the mid-80s. In 1983, he started Saleen Autosport as a Mustang modification shop. And let me just say that besides being a presenter and ideal, that sounds like one of the most badass jobs ever. I mean, for a living, you get to take badass Mustangs and make them even more awesome. Seems like Steve Saleen hit the lottery. Well, not really when you consider that he had the rights to his own name taken away from him at a board meeting. Anyway, while Saleen Autosport was under his direction, the company was churning out some stunning Foxbody modified Mustangs. They threw firmer shocks and springs in these things with bigger brakes and a few exterior and interior aesthetic tweaks as well. And under the hood, that V8 had some tweaks to it as well that brought some serious power out of that classic pony car. Saleen Foxbody Mustangs originally retailed for about $25,000, but because they're becoming more and more of a rarity, their prices actually seem to be increasing. Today, they're worth somewhere between $26,000 and $32,000. And the fact that Foxbody Mustangs in general are already pretty popular, and one of the premium tuners of the 80s like Saleen has his name slapped on it, this thing is definitely going up in value. Now this next car is a little bit different because if you drive this car, everybody's gonna assume that you have money to just blow. But what they don't need to know is that you can own this car for free. It's my favorite four-letter word. The Acura NSX is such a cool looking ride. It's either a quintessential Hot Wheels toy or the kind of car that you'd control in an old arcade racing game. And so it would appear that the best time to buy this car has already passed. But luckily, there is still time. It's just kind of running out. See, as we saw with the Mark IV Supra when the Mark V Supra was announced, and the same thing with the more veteran Broncos as the new Bronco was announced, when the newest generation of the Acura NSX became public, the older gen started going up in value. It's like pretty predictable. And yes, prices aren't cheap at all, and it will only be affordable to some, and I envy you. But here's the thing, if you can get in now, it is sure to increase in value from here. And I think we can all agree with one thing, the Acura NSX is just sick. This thing just brings me back to when I used to play with Hot Wheels and I used to just sit there and fantasize about owning my own set of ideal wheels. That futuristic looking front grille and water-like lines running down the sides were way ahead of their time. So it's crazy to think that this car debuted in 1990, and that sleek design combined with some serious internal specs quickly made the NSX one of the most sought after cars that Honda has ever rolled out. The NSX features an aluminum 3-liter V6 that spits out 270 horsepower, and it's got dual overhead cams and variable valve timing. Plus, it's reliable. And part of the reason why the NSX is so legendary is that it was designed in tandem with late F1 superstar Ayrton Senna. But what that means is that this street car was built for the racetrack. And with all that reliability that we've come to expect from Honda's manufacturing line, you can just rip this thing down the road all day and never expect to experience a single issue. And why it's on this list is because, well, you can expect to make a little bit of money on it when it comes time to sell. It just seems like the hype for these first gens continues to grow stronger every single day. And the NSXs from the 90s have just become more desirable to collectors. So now's the time to buy that Hot Wheels car of my dream, or your dream as well. And if it were me, I'd want to go for the NA2, like this Formula Red 2002 that has a little extra power and the facelift. And next up is a German car that will definitely impress all your high society friends. But when it comes time to exit, it's not going to cost you a dime to drive. It is no surprise whatsoever that another German car made it on this list. Car collectors everywhere ought to consider adding a Mercedes 190e to their collection. Yes, today the performance isn't anything to phone home about, but what's really appealing is the driving experience. It's the kind of car that made drivers feel classy in the 80s, and you could feel even more classy today, driving a classy classic Mercedes. And what I love about the Mercedes-Benz 190e Cosworth is that it's the car that makes other car enthusiasts just drool. And everybody else that sees you drive it, they think that you're either broke or really rich. See, the Cosy was a competitor to BMW in the touring car racing series DTM, and it was also a competitor in the marketplace back in the 80s. And so the BMW M3 and the 190e Cosworth were rivals. And yet today, the E30 M3 is the one that gets all the love. And that may just be to the fact that the 190e looks more like a taxi cab than a touring car legend. But the secret's safe between us, isn't it? And honestly, the Merc is a better driving experience overall. So it's no wonder that this DTM slang, Autobahn crushing sauerkraut, has been holding its value for years. So that means that you could buy an old Cosy, live out your DTM dreams, and pass it on to the next custodian without losing a dime. Now there's nothing really more American than a truck, and the Dodge Ram SRT10 is quintessentially American. This is an over-the-top pickup with no shame for its overly powerful engine that literally serves no real purpose other than to give you that little extra rumble while you're rolling down the road. Yes, it's got a naturally aspirated V10 engine that pumps out 500 horsepower and was pulled directly out of the Dodge Viper. And just to make sure you were paying attention, they threw a giant red starter button in the cab for good measure. Yeah, back in 2004, this was clocked by the Guinness Book of World Records as the fastest truck ever produced. And I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense. It's essentially a Viper with a bigger body and a flatbed. I mean, you can't get much more ridiculous than putting a powerful supercar engine in a pickup. Unfortunately, as you probably assumed, this thing guzzles gas like a hungry hippo, getting a deplorable 12 miles to the gallon. But that's the price that you gotta pay if you want a 5,100-pound animal that just jumps from 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds and has a top speed of almost 150 miles per hour. And these trucks, believe it or not, were forgotten about for a few years, but they are coming back with a vengeance in popularity. And so you know what happens when trucks become more popular? The market values go up. And so yes, you're gonna have to fork over a truck bed full of cash to get one. Well, it's actually not that bad, because when you sell it, you're gonna get a truck bed full of cash and a little bit more cash in the passenger seat. And on top of that, you get to drive around an absolute beast of a machine. Gotta love America. Gotta love the SRT10, and you gotta love the vehicles that you can drive for free or even make a little bit of money on. And that's what we're all about here at Ideal. So I know you guys are asking, which one would I choose to spend my hard-earned Ideal money on? Well, to be honest with you, it would be that Formula Red NSX. Let us know which one on this list you would pick and why down below. Also, if you're new here, my name's Brad Danger. This is Ideal. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and check out some of our other Ideal content, because we're coming at you with the heat pretty much every single day. And as always, keep living the Ideal lifestyle.